corner they're pointed a finger at simply because they are the majority community. That is what he says is the majoritarian myth. Now, Professor Gangopadhyay, thank you for writing this book. I'm sure it was not an easy task getting a theory like this out for public. In my simplistic head, this is how I understood the essence of your book. Would you like to expand on the idea? What is the majoritarian myth?
So, Namaskar, and thank you particularly Alodi for calling me here, and Deep, thank you for reading my book. So the idea, this majoritarianism, it is essentially coming what I call cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is a European phenomenon. It happened in Germany, Frankfurt School, a group of academicians. They developed these theories, and of course there's Antonio Gramsci, who was the leader of the Italian Socialist Party. His writings, his prison notebooks, they actually immensely contributed to development of this theory. So how did it go? So essentially, if you look at communism, it was dying in Europe. Why was it dying? Because the atrocities from Russia, Siberia, they are all surfacing up, right? Gulag, what happened, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn has very insightful books. So what these guys have done in the Marxian theory, there's a term, technical term he uses, base and superstructure. So the base is economics. So this production process, that's the base. So to change society, Marx says you have to change the economics. And that's how the idea of the socialist state comes along. But if you look at cultural Marxism, the base is not economics. The base is cultural identity. In the economic Marxism, any problem happens, it is always the bourgeoisie who is sort of guilty, right? The proletariat is always sort of nice. They can't do any wrong. Same thing is Gramsci saying here. He talks about the hegemony, right? Hegemony wise, a group has hegemony, and they are always any individual conflict. The person with the group identity, with the hegemonic group identity, is always guilty. Right? Person with a group identity of the non-hegemonic group identity is always innocent. And then it is translated, the majority they are having sort of the hegemony, and that's why they are always the guilty. Irrespective of the actual facts, or irrespective of actually what happens. So this is how this theory got developed over time. Yeah, please.
So, on the question of caste, I want you to spend some time on talking about it. Who do you think addresses or have addressed caste till now better? Cultural Marxism in the Indian context or Hindutva?
That's a very profound question. And it has a profound answer, is there in Aurobindo Nilakandanji, his book, Hindutva. So if you look at this idea of this caste, so it is a very nuanced concept. We all have our identities in a way, right? Now we are gotten rid of the old caste, but new caste systems are there. Here in the last 2-3 days, I am talking to different people, right? And now you can actually measure it up, who is conversing with whom, or all these kind of things, right? You will see there is sort of a thing. I mean, me, an academician, academic, I am talking about the fellow academics more. Journalist, I am talking with the journalist more. Defense persons are talking to the defense person more. So this is not a human nature. We like to talk to more about the people we share our domain expertise, our knowledge with, our experience of the world with. Caste or jati, as it is usually called, that actually grew nothing more than that. It was a very flexible sort of thing, and it was I can have a 3-day workshop on caste itself. So I won't stretch it too long, but I'm just giving you the broad synopsis. It was basically a very flexible thing, and when we were the big people, when Bharat was a big people and we are expanding, we included people. So there are people who came from the outside, right? Sakas, Hunas. They are included in our society as Kshatriyas, right? In our northwestern or western sort of provinces. So we are kind of inclusive in that sense. We are not excluding people. But then came our days of misery. We are being colonized, a big colonization for a millennia. And that time, what we are shrinking. And then we are shrinking, then what will happen that we will sort of increase the misery and become very rigid about these identities. So it is a very nuanced thing. Now, if you look at the current context of course, the question you are saying Hindutva. So
Hindutva versus cultural Marxism,
right? So Hindutva always they want to create a society, a powerful society, and they understand one thing: there is no unified society, there is no powerful society without the unity of the people. So naturally, if you look at just the theory-wise, Hindutva will be more sort of appreciative of forging and caste unity. Right? You can go back to Savarkarji. He was the first person who said, no, the untouchability has to be removed, and all the mass sort of the where people sit together and dine together. So all the people from different castes. So he kind of started all these things in the initial days. If you look at the cultural Marxists, it is, I think people will hate me in a way, but they all are coming from the upper caste, and they all are having very limited understanding about the dynamics of caste. Their understanding coming from the theory. On the other hand, there are people who are coming from lower caste. They are very successful. I give a name, Meghnad Saha. Meghnad Saha was coming from a lower caste, right? East Bengal, right? And he got very discriminated for his caste when he was a student. The towns which would bring tears to your eyes. But what happened? In his own lifetime, Meghnad Saha became a very accomplished person in Bengal. People are looking up to him. Not only his own caste, all Bengalis, they are looking up to him. They are worshipping him. And when the partition of Bengal happened, and there is a very good speeches of Meghnad Saha in parliament. He won from parliament, Lok Sabha, and then he gave very good speeches. And he said basically these communist policies and these Nehruvian policies, they are becoming a big failure. They are creating miseries, not only for people of his caste, but for all the Hindus. So in a way you can see where we are heading towards.
You should all look up Meghnad Saha. It's interesting he mentions him. Meghnad Saha was a brilliant scientist from Bengal. He was particularly hated by Pandit Nehru. In fact, one time Meghnad Saha told Nehru that in time, in history, people will forget a cancelled politician like you, but they'll remember a cancelled scientist like me. So it's very interesting. Professor Gangopadhyay is mentioning it. But let me ask this to you straight. Do you think cultural Marxism actually leads to conversions? If you push the idea of cultural Marxism, it destabilizes the Hindu structure and it leads more to conversions.
So I tell you what happens. This cultural Marxism, now incidentally, if you do it in Google now, there is a Wikipedia article that will come. It says this is a conspiracy theory. Few years ago in Wikipedia there is a very big article on this with very well referenced one. But cultural Marxists got so powerful. From the Wikipedia they have cancelled this article. And instead they inserted the article of cultural Marxism as a conspiracy theory. Now let me tell you this. There is a very preeminent Polish scholar, Leszek Kolakowski. And Leszek Kolakowski has a very seminal book, The Main Currents of Marxism. And this is published 1977-78, Oxford University Press, 3 volumes. And there he categorically mentions this idea that I am saying, this Gramsci, this Frankfurt School as extension of the Marxist thinking in the cultural domain. So this is a very well acknowledged theory, well acknowledged understanding, 50 years, preeminent scholars, but in Wikipedia they have cancelled it because they got so powerful. It actually shows the amount of intolerance the cultural Marxism has. Now if you are talking about the conversions out of Hindu or something like that, I do not particularly have a very strong Hindu identity. I consider more or less myself on the atheist front. But what I don't want, so I do not want to happen an India where 100% people are Hindu. But what I don't want to happen, and which cultural Marxism is facilitating, is having an India where nobody sees herself inheritor of the most sustainable civilization of the world history. A civilization that has catered to diversity for millennia. If you look at Ramayana, all the tribes that are mentioned, that were still present today. And this happened because we have this wonderful civilizational structure. That structure, they are trying to break it because they hate all existing structures. Does cultural Marxists or the liberals, do they really cater to, do they really love diversity? Do they cater to diversity? There is a very famous American thinker, Thomas Sowell. He said 50 years ago, show me one Republican in the sociology departments of US universities, right? So Republicans, 50% of the society, right? They're coming from the same society. Sociology department, there is no sociologist who calls himself or herself Republican, right? Now, liberal takeover happened of the academia, US academia. If you go to the US academia or US media community, less than 10%, after just a few years of liberal takeover, less than 10% of them, they call themselves law-liberals. And these are like old people, right? There are very, very original thinkers among them, like Jordan Peterson, Gad Saad, and they are actively being cancelled by the liberals. So you can see what cultural Marxism is leading to. It is leading to an illiteracy about culture. It is leading to a situation where we do not know what our identity is. We are all rootless people. And the imperialists, they love rootless people. That's what it is. So that's, I think I'll just ask for the next question to follow it up.
Before that, Lori, you are platforming too many atheists at Pondy Lit Fest. Shiva, Ranganathan, now Professor Ganguly. Sorry? Dangerous trend. You should check your list next year. You have a scientific mind, Professor Gangopadhyay. Tell us, how do we get out of this majoritarian myth you're talking about? I know how difficult it is for me to write the kind of books I write. I've been a journalist in Delhi for better part of my career. I know the constant pressures to adhere to a certain kind of ism. So how does one get out of the majoritarian myth and what it forces us to do?
It is a very sort of a personal engagement. My maternal grandfather, he was a whole-timer in the Communist Party. My father was communist for a quite long time of his life. He became a lapsed one. But and I am sort of thankful. I dedicated my book to my father for that reason, probably.
This book also goes to cultural Marxists.
So what I would say that when I grew up, I mean, most of my relatives, they were like leftists. And because my grandfather was there, I used to listen to these base superstructure theories when I was 6. Yeah, so I know these theories inside out. But what I have, I like to see things, what is the consequence, not what does it say. If I see the consequence, West Bengal, forgive me if I'm a parochial, but it was the best province of India 100 years ago. Bengal, I would say. Now it is, I don't want to use the word, but it is definitely not one of the best ones. Definitely not in Indian domain. How did it happen? It happened because the communists, they took over the entire intellectual space, the entire cultural space. That's how it has happened. And now I see it being replicated all over India. So I was sort of very aghast with the consequences. And I saw it is coming from the academia, from the academic theories. Thankfully, while I was young, I was still not very impractical. So I did not try to do a PhD in a sociology department and change it. That would have been disastrous for myself and for writing this book. I took a parallel path in economics where you are exposed to social theories to an extent, but you of course can go by your empirical understanding and can survive the day based on what you write on empirical understanding. So from that way I started my career, and I did it as a second job to study these theories and bring out the weakness in them. It took time, it took a lot of time, it took more than a decade, but it finally has happened as one book I have come out with. The most important book I say from India. Others could happen if people feel there is a need for that. So this is a personal journey that way. Now if you are coming back to science, I'll tell you something. I mean, I love a lot of liberal arts people and there are very fine people among them. But there is a problem there. The problem is that the scientific acumen, it is much less is talked by the scientists. It is far more talked by the people who are coming from the liberal arts background.